Prime Minister, Secretary General, Ministers, Excellencies, representatives of social partners and research community, colleagues, friends, as Greece's permanent representative to the OECD, I'm honored to extend a warm welcome to you all, and especially to you, Secretary General. Dear Matthias, welcome on the occasion of this important launch of the OECD Economic Survey of Greece. It comes in a long tradition of country surveys as a flagship OECD publication. Last one was launched here in January 2023. The country surveys represent one of the most important pieces of work undertaken by the OECD. They take stock of the progress, they outline the challenges of each country's economy, they deliver recommendations and point out areas of improvement. They are part of the valuable evidence-based analysis and advice delivered by the OECD to all its members and beyond. And I would like to thank, on behalf of the Greek delegation, the Country Studies branch of the OECD Economics Department and the Greek desk, both represented here today. Jens, Antoine, thank you. And of course, all the many good colleagues here in Greece who have worked for this survey. You know who you are. Thank you. Country surveys are pivotal in shaping economic policies of member states, providing impetus for important reforms. And for Greece, an economy that was plunged into a long, painful crisis, only to painstakingly find its way to a remarkable reform-led recovery, steered by responsible leadership, the economic surveys hold particular significance. So, an important day for the long-standing bond between Greece and the OECD. And that is one more reason why I'm honored and rejoiced to be opening the launch here today and to invite you, Secretary General, dear Matthias, to please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, George, dear Prime Minister, ministers. It's great to be back in Athens. So it's great to be here to launch the 2024 Economic Survey of Greece. Since our last economic survey in January 2023, as you mentioned, Greece has continued to pursue an ambitious reform agenda to boost growth and employment. Reforms have included efforts to reduce regulatory burdens, increase public sector efficiency by fostering digitalization of public services and targeted investments as part of the Recovery and Resilience Plan Greece 2.0. Economic growth in Greece since the pandemic has been robust despite the energy crisis and despite relatively low global growth. GDP last year in Greece grew by 2.3%, which was higher than the average growth rates in both the OECD and the euro area. The labour market continues to improve. The unemployment rate declined to 9.8% in October, following a broadly steady decline from a peak of 27.8% back in 2013. The resilience of the banking sector has also improved. The share of non-performing loans at 6.7% in the second quarter of this year has decreased sharply since 2017, when it stood at 47.6% of total gross loans. This is significant progress, though close monitoring will continue to be required. Our outlook for the Greek economy remains positive. The recent decline in inflation has further boosted consumption and enabled solid growth in the first half of 2024, and we project GDP to grow by 2.3% this year, 2.2% next year, and 2.5% in 2026, with domestic demand the main driver of that continued growth. Inflation is projected to decline further to 2.7% next year and 2.1% in 2026. Increasing disbursements of European recovery and resilience funds will support investment, while rising disposable incomes will strengthen consumption. We also expect that these positive trends will support a further decline in the unemployment rate to 8.9% by 2026, which would be its lowest level since 2009. Our survey highlights four policy priority areas for Greece that would help support a continued increase in incomes and living standards and improve Greece's economic resilience to shocks. First, by further improving fiscal sustainability. Public finances have improved, though continued efforts are needed to ensure a further decline of public debt. At 163.9% of GDP in 2023, public debt has fallen markedly since the pandemic and is expected to continue its decline to 148.1% of GDP by 2026. And indeed, the return of Greek sovereign debt to investment grade rating in September last year was a key milestone as part of that journey. Continuing to achieve sufficient primary fiscal surpluses will be key to continue bringing debt down and safeguard the credibility of Greece's debt servicing capacity. There is still opportunity to further improve the efficiency and allocation of public spending. This will create more fiscal space and facilitate fiscal consolidation in a context of increasing spending pressures, including towards necessary productivity and growth-enhancing investments in infrastructure, education, and research. Through spending and investment reviews, the efficiency of public investment could be increased by identifying savings or by improving the targeting of public expenditure. Also, reducing tax expenditure, including value-added tax exemptions, would help lower distortions in the tax system. Greece's tax revenues of 41% of GDP in 2022 were above the OECD average of 34%, with scope to increase the efficiency through which revenues are raised. Limiting tax exemptions can help optimize tax revenues and make room for reductions of taxes such as those on labor income, which would support further economic and employment growth. Improving tax compliance also will help create more fiscal space. At 17.8%, the value-added tax compliance gap, that's the difference between expected and collected value-added tax revenues, remains comparatively large. To put that proportion into perspective, that 17.8% gap in Greece compares to an average across the European Union of 5.4%, though I hasten to add the trend is very much in the right direction. We recognize the efforts that have been made on this front in recent years. So continuing efforts to limit cash transactions and promote digital payments would help to further strengthen tax compliance moving forward. The second policy priority is to boost firm growth and innovation to raise productivity. Greece's labour productivity is about 40% lower than the OECD average, and productivity growth in Greece has been low for some time. As the population ages, not just in Greece, but all around the OECD and in countries around the world, but as the population ages and the share of the working age population declines, productivity increases will be essential to support future improvements in incomes and living standards. The adoption of AI technologies provides new opportunities for firms to innovate and to become more productive, as was also recently emphasized in Greece's new national AI strategy developed at your initiative, Prime Minister. Strengthening competition by further reducing the regulatory burden on firms would support business dynamism. Greece has made significant progress on this front in lifting regulatory barriers to competition. In fact, I was able to report to the Prime Minister that between 2018 and 2023, Greece achieved the largest improvement of all OECD economies in the competition friendliness of its regulations as measured by the OECD product market regulation indicators. The regulatory framework is now better suited to support starting up a business with greater transparency and simplicity in administrative process and legislation and fewer restrictions on foreign firms doing business in Greece. However, there's still scope to do more, and also I guess it will take a little bit of time for perceptions to adjust to the new reality, to make sure that people actually understand how much easier it is to do business in Greece today than what it might have been in the past. Regulations in service sectors, though, remain restrictive, and there is opportunity for them to be relaxed and to move closer to the OECD average. The recent easing of licensing restrictions in several technical professions certainly on that front is very welcome, but for example, the legal profession remains more strictly regulated and would also benefit from lifting restrictions, including on joint ownership of legal firms with non-lawyers. This would help increase competition, provide better services for businesses, and help further strengthen incentives to invest and to innovate. Higher investment in innovation would also help increase productivity. Greek firms invest less in research and development than firms across the OECD. The investment in research and development by Greek firms sits at about 0.7% of GDP in 22, well below the OECD average of 2%. Improving public support for research and development can help strengthen incentives, especially for smaller firms, to invest and lower the productivity gap between small and large firms. Loan guarantees and subsidized lending programs should be systematically evaluated to ensure that they are actually effective in boosting investment in new technologies. A third priority is to continue the efforts to increase the level of employment on the back of developing the skills actually required across the economy. Despite a significant reduction in the unemployment rate, unemployment remains comparatively high at a time of comparative labour market tightness, driven by labour and skills shortages. More employment would support higher tax revenues and lower social expenditure and is a key to address Greece's demographic challenges, where population ageing will require drawing on the workforce's full potential. So better training opportunities would support job matching. Labour shortages have increased, as I say, despite a relatively high level of unemployment, which indicates that there are significant skills mismatches between workers and jobs, or between job seekers and jobs. Almost 1/5 of youth aged 20 to 24 are neither in education, employment, nor training, which is significantly above the OECD average, which calls for better training policies and more information about labour market requirements, beginning at the secondary education level, to provide young people with the relevant skills to strengthen their career opportunities moving forward. Strengthening vocational training is key to reduce labour market mismatches. The uptake of vocational education enrolment in recent years is welcome, but we would suggest would need to be further accelerated. Greece should build on recent progress with its reform of the national vocational education system to roll out work-study programs more broadly, and further improvement should focus on strengthening the role of workplace training and close cooperation with private sector employers, including via vocational high schools. This would make vocational education more attractive, help students transition into working life, and provide more valuable skills to workers and businesses. Focusing active labour market policy spending on relevant training would also help increase the effectiveness of that public support. Current spending on labour market programs is often targeted on direct job creation programs in public works. We have not found these programs particularly effective in bringing workers back to the labour market. More spending on training and counselling for job seekers would help to improve labour market outcomes in a more effective way, we believe. The expansion of training programs for job seekers and for those outside the labour market should go together with an increased focus on the quality of those programs and their systematic evaluation. Expanding childcare facilities would help strengthen women's labour market participation. The gap in employment rates between men and women remains significant in Greece, comparatively significant in Greece, although it has narrowed recently. Greece's gender employment gap of 17.2%, as I say, is well above the OECD average. This may reflect the limited availability of affordable childcare services at early ages, and shifting resources currently spent on cash support for families towards the development of childcare services could allow more women to join the labour market. The fourth priority area relates to the area of the climate transition. A mix of policy tools is needed to continue to transition to net zero. Greece has cut its greenhouse gas emissions by 42% over the past 2 decades, which means that Greece is on track to become a net zero emission economy by 2050. Yet Greece still produces more greenhouse gas emissions per unit of output than countries in the OECD or the European Union on average. A mix of policy tools, including the better pricing of emissions, would support the continued transition to net zero. More consistent price signals would help businesses and households find the most cost-efficient ways of cutting their emissions. On this front, phasing out fossil fuel subsidies would be an important step in this direction. Tailored incentives and regulations to foster green investments in the sectors responsible for the bulk of emissions, including energy, will be an important part of the approach. Greece already produces more electricity from renewable sources than the OECD on average, with a share of 42.7% relative to 31.4%, but here also more can be done. The swift implementation of the planned one-stop shop for renewable energy projects and a review of current procedures for obtaining environmental licenses would help boost renewable energy capacities further. Climate change adaptation policies need to be stepped up to help address the impact of disasters. A large part of the Greek population is exposed to climate hazards and disasters, as evidenced by the increase in wildfires and winter storms in recent years. So far, much of the cost of these disasters has been borne by the government through necessary ad hoc policy responses. Private insurance should play a stronger role, and Greece has taken welcome steps to promote the uptake of private insurance. Going forward, incorporating climate hazard planning into the preparation of infrastructure projects is key to mitigate the potential risks of climate change. So in closing, Greece has made enormous reform progress in recent years. The economy is growing, employment is rising, unemployment is falling, debt as a share of GDP has come down sharply, with Greek sovereign debt having recovered its investment-grade rating. Things are heading in the right direction in Greece, with a more dynamic and more resilient economy, creating opportunities for people across Greece to get ahead. It will be important to continue these efforts to achieve stronger and sustainable improvements in incomes and living standards, including by further strengthening public finances, boosting productivity and innovation, advancing employment and skills development, and by accelerating the climate transition. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, Ministers, for giving me the opportunity to present this report to you.
I'm now honored to invite you, Prime Minister, to please take the floor.
Well, dear Secretary General, dear Matthias, it's a great pleasure to welcome you here in Athens, joined by your team and by our excellent ambassador. Dear George, thank you for the work you've done. And the launch of country survey is always a big event. Again, thank you for the highly interesting and insightful presentation. I think it's a presentation that acknowledges the very, very substantial progress that Greece has made over the last 5 years, but it also presents, and that is where I find it in being particularly valuable, useful proposals regarding a future course of action. I think there's no doubt, and I think this is confirmed by the study, that the Greek economy today is in a much, much better shape than it used to be 5 years ago. And this progress is actually making, a real difference in our citizens' living standards, as evidenced by the decline in unemployment, but also the rise in real wages presented in the survey, particularly for the years 2023 and 2024. And we should not forget that the Greek economy has created 500,000 jobs over the past 5 years. And having said that, I also agree that there is still a lot to be done to achieve the convergence of our citizens' living standards with the OECD and, of course, the European average. And to achieve this convergence, which has been the main goal of our government and the central theme of our 4-year mandate, we need to maintain the policy pillars that have served Greece so well since 2019. These are pointed out in the survey: sound fiscal policy, continued improvement in financial conditions, and very, very importantly, implementation of growth, but also inclusiveness enhancing reforms. And following the pandemic shock of 2020, Greece has been consistently outperforming the EU average growth, but also the OECD average growth by a significant margin. And at the same time, our economic activity is very quickly rebalancing more towards investment and exports, with Greece being the EU country with the highest growth in investment volume since 2019. Now, also, the composition of our economic activity has been gradually changing. The share of industry and manufacturing has been increasing, both in terms of GDP and in terms of employment. And all in all, this process of convergence has been set in motion. And this is also reflected in the survey's estimate of strong growth in potential output, denoting an acceleration in Greece's productive capacity. I think you rightly point out that growth has resulted in a very significant reduction in unemployment, which is now half of what it was in 2019. And one needs to point out that these employment gains are more pronounced among women and among the young. It is also positive to see that labor market participation is increasing among these groups. I think it's encouraging to see that pensioners are returning to the labor market following the provision of suitable incentives last year. And on the fiscal front, Greece has returned to sound primary balances. In 2024 and 2025, we do expect a headline deficit close to zero, while the debt to GDP ratio is declining at a very fast path. You highlighted very significant developments in our banking sector, which have been positive. As the cleanup of the crisis legacy is now advanced, banks are financing the real economy at a gradual pace. They need to do much more. We'll talk about that much more in more detail over the next days. The improved growth, financial and fiscal outlook of the country, combined with the credibility of our economic policy, has resulted in a marked improvement in Greece's market standing, its sovereign borrowing terms. We have regained investment grade, which was the main goal that we had set out before the 2023 elections. Our government bond yields, dear Matthias, have been declining probably at a faster pace than many had expected, in spite of global inflation, economic uncertainty. We dropped below those of many of Euro area member states. And all this is very positive, but it cannot be a reason to become complacent, nor should we be unaware of the continued challenges. The levels of per capita GDP, investment, unemployment, productivity continue to be below the OECD and EU average. And furthermore, although the process of disinflation continues, as in many OECD states, this last mile of the journey back to the 2% inflation target is harder than the previous stages. Price levels continue to be elevated. Therefore, despite rising nominal and real wages, our citizens continue to feel pressure on their purchasing power. And we fully acknowledge this is a significant problem, not just for Greece, but I imagine for most OECD countries. But going forward, I do expect this problem to be moderated. The recent inflationary episode is drawing towards a close, but real wage growth accelerates. And this is an expectation which is also shared by the survey. And going forward, we agree with the survey's view that a key imperative for Greece will be to maintain our high growth rates by strengthening, in particular, productivity, investment, and employment. And this also, of course, means maintaining that public debt stays on a firmly declining path, but also increasing the fiscal space for investment in line with the conclusions of the survey. And we will pursue this objective through maintaining the appropriate primary surpluses, but we will also focus on growth-enhancing reforms and the continued reduction of tax evasion. In this area, dear Matthias, there has been significant progress. I'm glad that this is acknowledged in the survey. We have also added an additional package of measures which we legislated in 2024, 11 measures aiming to reduce tax evasion. And I do expect that when the next year's survey is going to come out, we will see a significant improvement in our performance in this area. And I do believe that the measures that we have taken probably have also exceeded our own expectations, bringing in extra revenue, which already, for example, has been used this year to finance public investments, health expenditure, education, but also measures aiming to tackle the significant demographic challenges that our country is facing, very similar to that of many other OECD countries. This is a challenge that requires long-term policies. Here, let me point out that Greece is also one of those OECD countries that is investing significantly above the OECD average when it comes to defense. Europe is faced with a drastically different situation, big geopolitical challenges. We're all obliged to step up our military expenditure. This will, of course, add more pressure on our public finances, and that is why within the European Union I have been arguing in favor of treating defense spending as a common European public good. It's important that EU member states coordinate their policies from joint procurement to joint production, but to also possibly the joint financing of military investment. And the same proposal, of course, could also apply to investments related to green transition. Greece has made significant progress in this area. We produce more than 50% of our electricity from wind and solar, and the green transition, of course, is a top European priority, but it needs to happen in a way so that it does not undermine European competitiveness, especially the competitiveness of European industry. But it is also the example of a European common good, which requires, very big investments, but also policy coordination and common investments that will benefit the European continent as a whole. The Draghi report, for example, highlights the need to focus on pan-European energy interconnections and building an integrated European energy market should be probably one of the top priorities for the next Commission, but also for the European Council. On a related subject, I'm very much in agreement with the survey's analysis on climate-related risks, and following last year's disastrous floods in Thessaly, we have introduced a policy comprising of additional adaptation spending. By the way, that's another European common good. Building and ring-fencing fiscal buffers to cover costs when risks materialize, but also introducing mandatory private insurance so as to set a limit to the fiscal exposure to natural disasters. And in the 2025 budget, we actually expand these measures. I found the survey's thematic chapter on boosting firm growth and innovation to be of particular interest. We recognize that innovation and productivity growth are critical challenges for Greece, and they are key for ensuring long-term growth, particularly under the present demographic challenges. And we share the survey's view regarding the importance of the regulatory framework, competition in goods and services markets as drivers of higher investment and productivity. Indeed, thank you for acknowledging that Greece has improved substantially its business environment, as depicted by the strong improvement in the OECD Product Market Regulation Index and other similar rankings, and we will continue along the same path. Regarding skills, and this is an area of great priority also to me personally, we have invested a significant amount of funds, many of them actually financed by the RRF, the training of 300,000 people in green and digital skills. But at the same time, we acknowledge that we need to do much more, and we need to work with the social partners in this area in terms of making sure that the skills training, upskilling and reskilling that we offer is not just a bureaucratic process that helps us to absorb European funds, but really leverages the need to make sure that we bridge the mismatches which currently exist in our labor market. And I would like to end my remarks by making a special reference to artificial intelligence, a subject which is at the cutting edge of the global debate on productivity. And a major national objective for Greece is to catalyze this global technological revolution in artificial intelligence for the benefit of the country and its people. We recognize that we are a relative latecomer to artificial intelligence, but this may also offer us an opportunity to leapfrog to the next generation of AI development, exploiting possible competitive advantages. We come to this challenge with great ambition. Just a week ago, the high-level advisory committee on artificial intelligence presented a very ambitious document. This is our blueprint for Greece's AI transformation. This is essentially our national AI strategy. It sets out our principles. It identifies a dozen flagship projects which offer large transformational potential for Greece in the AI space. We want to be protagonists in creating a forward-looking, adaptable, transparent regulatory framework within the relatively broad parameters of the AI Act that embraces innovation, that supports the booming ecosystem of technology startups that already exist in Greece, but that also offers valuable tools for improving productivity of the public service. And of course, the stimulation of economic activity around sectors where Greece is in a unique position or in high need of innovation: culture, shipping, health, tourism, sustainable agriculture, energy, climate mitigation, adaptation. All these are areas which could greatly benefit from the AI revolution. And of course, we also remain active on AI within the OECD. In October, Greece co-chaired with Canada the global OECD strategy group, bringing together 50 countries, including members of the Global Partnership on AI, to jointly explore the critical topic of the future of AI governance and to coordinate, to create coordinated approaches. And with this remark, dear Matthias, let me thank you once again for presenting this very valuable survey. The next survey in 2026, I'm confident will have more positive content reflecting the improved living standards for the citizens of Greece, whose welfare is a top priority of my government. And let me end by offering a more sort of a political observation. All these reforms, in order to be implemented, require a conducive political environment. Greece is now a country which has a stable government with an absolute majority in parliament. And at a time when the politics of many European countries are becoming that much more complicated, this is the most important necessary precondition to implement an ambitious reform program. And we are in the fortunate position to meet this precondition. And we certainly intend to honor the trust which was offered to us very generously by the Greek people in the recent election, and to make sure that we move forward with ambitious reforms. These reforms sometimes are faced with political objections. They ruffle the feathers of special interests. This is quite natural when we talk about ambitious reforms. But our commitment to our reform agenda remains unwavering, and it is very much in line with the suggestions of the OECD Economic Survey for Greece. So thank you again very much for being here and for presenting this.